This is the design and implementation of a computer network for CNT 4703C for the fall of 2015. My name is Stephen Lynch, and I was tasked with creating the presentation for Group 4. During the implementation, I helped with cabling and the pinging of IP addresses.
My name is Stephen Dyson, and I'm here today to talk about our design implementation project for our networking class. I manage the router aspect of our project. We were to connect 3 different routers, one being at a remote office, to communicate over several IP addresses. The way we handled this from a routing aspect is we named router 1 R1, router 2 R2, and router 3 R3. R3 was our remote office router. It connected over Ethernet from the gigabit port on router 2 to the gigabit port on router 3. We used static routes for anything that was for any IP that was located on router 1 or router 2. The static route was implemented on router 3 because the static route needs to be the next hop. So if you wanted to communicate with an IP address under router 1, I needed to implement that into router 3. I did the same thing from router 2 to router 1 and from router 1 to router 2, and router 1 and router 2 were connected over serial cables.
So basically I said any hops to 192.30 or 192.40 need to go over our serial cable, which is 10.10.100.2, which is router 2, and to set it I did and then it is IP route, IP address, subnet mask, destination.
My name is Andres Hiron, and I was in charge of all physical cabling and consistency. After Dyson was done connecting and routing everything, I was letting him know where each route and all the switches became to each physical port and what consoles port we're going to watch physical port. I was connecting all the switches to the port, to the patch panels, and making sure everything was consistent, keeping everything on track, documenting everything for testing and on further connectivity. After the routes were completed, we will switch to the patch panel and test it with a computer. After the computers were pinging each other and the routes were working, I was in charge of disconnecting the actual Ethernet cable and connecting it back to the patch panel to get the next route working with the switch.
My name is Michael Taylor, and I was in charge of programming the switches for the project. Before I started on the switches, I verified connectivity between the other workstations by pinging from my workstation. Once that was done, I connected to the switch through serial and PuTTY and set up port interfaces and IP addresses for the switches. Once that was finished, I trunked the ports to the router to gain connectivity.
Hi, my name is Vishal Adani, and during the implementation of our project, my job was to configure the IP addresses on all the 3 host machines. I physically we use static route as Steven mentioned, and I configured each IP for each host machine. So that way, when Steven and Michael were done configuring the switches and the routers, when we tried to ping each from one host machine to another host machine, it would ping and there would be no packet loss. I was also in charge of creating the draft design of our project. I created the draft design with the help of my team and made sure that the routers had their own IPs and the switches were trunked properly, so that way we could communicate between the routers and the switches, and gave the host their own IP addresses so they can communicate from the host to the switch and switch to the router.